Welcome back, boys and girls. It's your main math man, Mr. Shank, coming to you live from Alameda International High School. And in this video, still working on some graphing those linear functions and some review to go over. So it says, given an equation in the slope-intercept form, so that's going to be that y equals that mx plus b. Again, make sure you're separating each of those terms one at a time. So we're going to say that letter b, or our variable b, is going to be that y-intercept. And so we're going to say that's going to represents the starting value. We'll say that's the starting value on that y-axis. So again, that's where it hits your graphical line, hits the y-axis. And we can say that letter M, that's going to stand for our slope. And again, we're going to say that tells you the direction. So it tells you the direction that our line moves. So the direction in which our line moves. So always moving left to right, but are we saying, are we going up or are we going down? So make sure you're saying, okay, if it is a positive slope, meaning a positive m, we have to say that graph goes up. So that graph goes up. If it's a negative m, we're going to say that graph goes down. So now, what happens when it's a whole number? So that means an integer value. So we're going to say if it is a whole number, again, that's the number of units. You can say units or you can say steps, whatever works best for you. But we're going to say number of units up or down, depending if it's positive or negative. Then we're going to say and always one to the right. The reason why we're doing this is because we're saying our denominator is going to be 1 since it's a integer value. However, if it's a fraction, meaning a fractional number, we can say this. We can say the numerator, meaning the top, is going to be the number of units. So we say the number of units up or down. So that's our change in our y values. However, our denominator, that's going to be our change in our x values, denominator. And so we're going to say number of steps to the right. So always moving, left to right on that x-axis. So steps to the right. All right. So now for an example, it can kind of look like this. We can say y equals, and then we have negative 2/3 times x plus 5. And so what are some parts of this that we can take away? Well, where does our graph of our line hit the y-axis? Meaning, what is our y-intercept? And we'd say our y-intercept for this one is going to be plus 5. So that means we can graph the point 0, 5. Again, that's always where x equals 0 is where it's going to hit that y-axis. And then what else do we notice? We can say our slope for this one is going to be that negative 2/3. So we can say, all right, we have negative 2/3. And so what does that mean? Well, what does that tell us? We can say this. We can say we start at that point 0, 5, and then we go 2 units down and 3 units right. So that's what we're going to do every time you move on that coordinate plane. You can move 2 steps down, 3 steps right, 2 steps down, 3 steps right each time to build that staircase. Draw your line through those points so that way you're good. All right, so now in the top right it says your turn to try this one out. Again, feel free to pause at any point in time or rewind if you need to. So it says identify the components and graph the equation. So we're saying, okay, we have this equation, y equals negative 4 over 5 times x plus 7. So what do we know about this? Well, we can say, hey, our y-intercept for this, meaning where it hits the y-axis, is going to be that value. So we're going to say 0, 7, and our slope is going to be that value that's attached to our variable x, and so that's going to be that -4 over 5. So we say -4 over 5. And so what does that tell us? Well, we start at that point 0, 7, we go down 4, and then we go right 5. And so what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to plot that point 0, 7. Make sure you can remember, always start at the origin when you're plotting those points. And so I say, okay, I move left to right 0, so I just stay at x equals 0, and then I can move up 7, so I plot the point 0, 7. So remember again, that's where our graph of our line hits the y-axis, and you know it's the y-axis because it's going up and down. And then we can say, all right, we have to move 4 steps down. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to go 4 steps down. So go 1, 2, 3, 4. So -4, and I can say I go 5 steps to the right. So I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps to the right. So +5, and that means I'm going to have another ordered pair at this point. So again, make sure you have to change in the y, and you have to have a change in x to get you next ordered pair. I can repeat that process as many times as I need to, but what I can do is just kind of draw out another point. So let me go down 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have -4, and I can say I have +5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, I'm always moving to the right, and then depending if it's a negative or positive, we have to go up or down. So we're going to say +5 for this one. So again, I can graph that ordered pair. So I have these ordered pairs. So I have 1, 2, 3 points. Again, you only need 2 points to draw a line, but it's good practice. And so now what I can do, it should always make a straight line if it's a linear function. And if you notice, hey, my points don't make a straight line, then you know you have to fix that. So if I have these points going through a line, I can say, okay, I can connect those points and I have my linear function. So now I can draw that line through those points to draw my graph. And then at the bottom, it has this. It has the equation y equals 1/3 times x minus 5. And so, okay, let's be able to take some parts away from this and tell us what that means. So we have our y-intercept is going to be the point 0, -5. And we can say our slope is going to be 1/3. And so what does that tell us? Well, if you're looking at that fraction, always look at that numerator for the change in y, the denominator change in x. And so since it's going to be a positive number, we're going to be moving up and to the right. So I'm going to say I move 1, let me actually write it like this. So I move up 1 step, and I move right 3. So that's going to be our pattern for this. Make sure you can plot that point first. So I have the y-intercept is going to be 0, -5. And then I can go, let's say, how many do I go? I go up 1. So I have up 1. So that's +1. And then I can move to the right 3. So I have 1, 2, 3. +3. And notice how it's only increasing by a small amount, and that makes sense because our slope is a fraction value, just a very slight increase each time. So I'm going to move up 1, to the right 3, 1, 2, 3, up 1, and then to the right 3, 1, 2, 3. So again, be careful. The common mistake is people want to connect wherever their points are. Make sure you're making a change in the y and a change in x, and then you plot those points. So I have 4 points on the graph. I can draw the line through those points. So I'm going to line these up nice and smooth. Again, make sure your ordered pairs make a nice little straight line for yourselves. Kind of use a straight edge. Maybe that doesn't have a splinter in it, but as long as it is a straight edge, you'll be good. All right, and then on the bottom right, it has this, let me make sure this is in there, something like this. It has the equation y equals 3x minus 8. So be able to identify that slope and that y-intercept given that equation. So we're gonna say our y-intercept, again, is where x equals 0. Our y value is gonna be negative 8. That means our slope for this, again, that's that value attached to a variable x. So we're gonna say it's gonna be 3. And so what does that tell us? Well, if we think back to what we defined up here, we said it's a whole number. So it's always gonna be up or down, but always one step to the right. So that means this. Given the slope is 3, we're gonna say we move up 3, and then we're gonna say we go right 1. And if you need to write it as a fraction, you certainly can. I personally like working with fractions, but that's up to you. So now that we have our y-intercept and our directions, we can plot those points and graph the line. So we have the order pair 0, negative 8, so all the way at the bottom, 0, negative 8, and then we're going to move up 3 steps. So notice, since this is a integer value, again, the larger the value, the steeper the slope. So that means our slope, so we're going to have 1, 2, 3, so we have plus 3, and then to the right 1. So each time I make this staircase, I'm saying, hey, I'm moving up 1, or excuse me, I'm moving up 3, and to the right 1. So each of those steps helps me build that staircase. And then once I have those, I can plot those points. Again, be sure that you're having a change in the x and a change in the y before you graph those order pairs. And I can draw the line for those points. Make sure it forms that straight line so that way you know it's a linear function. So notice how compared to the other graphs, this one is more steep because our slope is a larger value. So then on the back, some different forms or representations of those linear functions. And so it says now for given a table, what do we need to do? So we need to figure out and see that the 2-column table represents the coordinates on the coordinate plane. So we're gonna say, you know, an order pair, an x and a y value is a point on the graph. And so the table is just a list of those values. So all I have to do is simply graph them. So let's do that first. So I'm gonna graph the order pair. Again, make sure you can remind yourself, what are those directions again? So I have an order pair x and y. So I need both of those to get to where I'm going. If I'm plotting the point x first, I have to move left or right. Again, remember, left is negative, right is positive. However, if I'm moving on the y-axis, I have to say up is positive, down is negative. So again, make sure you can make that a little helpful image for yourself. So if I'm plotting the point negative 3, 8, again, always start at the origin 0, 0. I go 3 steps to the left, 1, 2, 3, and 8 steps down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So all the way in the bottom left corner is my point. Draw the next one, or plot the next one, negative 1, negative 5. And then I have 1, negative 2. I have 3, 1, and 5, 4. And if you notice, those values or those order pairs end up making a straight line. So it says you can estimate the y-intercept after connecting the points with the line. So let's just do that. So again, if your values don't line up on your graph, you might need to double check your work. So we have draw the line through those points. And so we're saying, okay, where's gonna be our y-intercept? So it's gonna be in between negative 3 and negative 4. So I'm gonna say about, it's gonna be that point 0 and then negative 3.5. So it's gonna be about in between those two values. And so what do we notice? Well, if I look at this table of values, I can also find my slope. So I can say, well, what is that change in my y values? So I'm gonna say if I'm at negative 8 and I go to negative 5, what happened? Well, it's increasing by 3. We're getting closer to 0, and so if you notice that pattern, it's increasing by 3 each time. And so we can say, what is our change in y? We would say it's up. We'd say it's up 3. However, for that change in x, again, look at that list of x values, and so we can say, all right, what's happening from one point to the next? We're increasing by 2. So we'd say we're increasing by 2 in the x values. So our change in x is going to be right 2. And so again, always can write your slope as that fraction where the numerator is the change in y and the denominator is that change in x. And so I can just write my slope as a fraction. I have 3 over 2. And again, it's positive. Notice how our graph of our line is going to the right and up. And so that makes sense as our graph is going up and to the right. And then for the last one, at the bottom, make sure it's in there. Okay. For that last one at the bottom, same kind of idea, have that table, plot those points. And so I want to plot out these points. It has -3, 5. So I go 3 left, 5 up, plot the point. I have 1, 2, so I go 1 step to the right, 2 steps up. Then it has the point 5, -1, so 5 to the right, down 1. For 9, 4, I go 9 to the right, and 4 down. Again, always take your time when you're plotting those points. If it doesn't make that straight line, you need to go back and double check your work. And lastly, it has 13 to the right and 7 down. So again, always move left or right first, and then up or down for your y-axis. And I can graph the line through those points. Again, it should make a nice straight line like so. And use that straight edge for yourself. So now that I have those points through the line, I can say, hey, I can estimate where it hits that y-axis. Again, I can highlight that y-axis. Again, that's that vertical axis. And if you noticed in that first one, it kind of hit at that point of 0, -3.5. And then on this last one, we can say, as I highlight that y-axis, where does it hit? Where does the graph of our line hit that y-axis? You can say, hey, it's pretty close to that value of 3. So we're going to say our y-intercept for this one is going to be 0, 3. And then we can say, all right, given that table, what's the change in our y values? Well, are we increasing or decreasing? Well, if I go from 5 to 2, I'm going to be decreasing. So that means I have to say 5 minus 3 is going to be 2. And then if you notice, that's going to be the pattern for these values. I'm always looking for that change in y first. And if you notice, it's going to be that pattern. I'm going down by 3. So my change in y is going to be -3. However, for my change in x, what's happening? I'm going from -3 to +1, so that means I'm increasing it by 4, so it's a +4 for each of those x values. So I can notice that pattern between each of those points. Now I'd say my change in x is going to be +4. Always write your slope as a fraction first, and so I can say, all right, what's the change in y? -3, and what's my change in x? It's going to be +4. And so what I want to close with is this. I have these two tables, I have my two graphs. What would be the equation for each of those functions? So I could say, all right, well, it's always going to be in that form, y equals mx plus b. So we have the two parts that we need to replace. So I'm going to say this. In that top one, I'm going to say my slope is 3 over 2, and my y-intercept is -3.5. So my equation for this function is going to be y equals, what's m? I have my slope, so I have 3 over 2 times x, and then I have my y-intercept, which is b, so I'd say -3.5. So my equation for this is going to be y equals 3 over 2x minus 3.5. And then lastly, for this equation at the bottom, or this function at the bottom, I should say, I can say y equals, what's my slope? And I'm going to have -3 over 4 times x, and then what's my y-intercept? And I'd say +3. So my function for this, or my equation for this, would be y equals -3 over 4x plus 3. Be sure to pause at any point in time, and as always, super slam that subscribe button.